and Ned Pope and others. So take it away, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, everybody. And great event, great job, Lucas and the team. So it's listed that I'm here as Florida Funders, and many of you know me as my role in Florida Funders, which I'm quite proud of and passionate about. And we've had a lot of success over the last year, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to sort of share that experience that I had in the last year running around this great state and meeting many of you people and being literally blown away at the quality and the passion of the work that you do every day. And then sort of coming back to my office in Tampa and meeting with many of the 650 or so investors, but let's just say dozens of those 650 investors who are a part of Florida Funders today, and seeing that there was a disconnect. They were, for the most part, completely unaware of the richness of what we were doing in our state, and many of them were serial entrepreneurs who've built very substantial businesses. They're in their 40s, 50s, and 60 years old, and they just had no real idea. And the other thing that I noticed about many of those people is they had a real willingness to put their capital to work, but they weren't of the mindset to travel about the state and really working hard at getting to know all of us or all of the great organizations that we have, or attend an event in South Florida or in Naples or in Orlando. They really wanted a bit more of a curated experience, a little easier to navigate, a little more clearly defined to what their investment thesis was. And so it began to dawn on me that we have this amazing state. It's big and it's beautiful and it's full of amazing talent and all of the great things that have been talked about here this morning. But it isn't exactly the easiest place to navigate if you're not the 10%, and I'll just use that term 10%, of the people who really want to wake up every day and engage in this meaningful way that we all do. And so how do we make it so that the rest of all of our wonderful resources, whether they be talent or advisors or corporate innovation challengers or investors or even serial entrepreneurs who aren't engaged in the early stage ecosystem? I built 3 companies over 25 years and never really engaged with my companies in the early stage ecosystem. I just built them heads down. And so how do we engage more of those people? And so, the hypothesis is if we really want to achieve the best that we can be as a state and launch Florida's vision, we should make it a bit easier for the other 90% to find what they're looking for. And that is the hypothesis of this project, this idea called Synapse. And it's been bubbling up for the last 7 or 8 months. I think around the holidays I met with Ned Pope and with Lucas, and we've been talking with Steve Tingaris and a lot of other folks. And many of you heard about our Innovation Summit that we did in Tampa in January, and we had a breakout session for entrepreneurial support organizations in the morning sessions, and a lot of these observations, I think, were shared by groups that were predominantly West Central Florida focused, but even in our little world, just from Tampa to across the bay in St. Petersburg, it's even sometimes hard to navigate that, and it's just literally 20 miles away. So we decided after the Innovation Summit that maybe we would take that information and grab a small group of people who were committed to brainstorming and creating. Andy Hafer joined, and Brian Kornfeld, and a number of other really talented people, and started to really think about what could we do. And the aha moment happened at a beer with a guy by the name of Hondo Gertz. So there are really 2 primary outside influencers that were the aha moment, or the 2x4 across the skull. moment for me. Hondo Gertz runs procurement for Special Operations Command. He has an $8 billion annual budget that he is responsible for procuring innovation. And most of that $8 billion, because SOCOM actually runs on about $43 billion, is dedicated to sort of taking commercial products and other less military-like problems and getting them solved through innovation and innovation challenges. It could be software, cybersecurity, wearables, all of the things that we see in the richness of our ecosystem. And Hondo said to me, I have $8 billion, SOCOM is in Tampa, Florida, I'm a Floridian, and I find myself flying all over the country and all over the world to find companies that can meet my needs. And he's not flying to Northrop Grumman. He's flying to Tel Aviv, he's flying to San Francisco, and he's meeting with early stage companies and innovators to solve problems with drones and wearables and software and cybersecurity. And Hondo said, I have a difficult time trying to spend my money in Florida. It's just too difficult. Now, I don't know if he's the classic example, but we have one of the biggest purchasers of innovation in the world located in Florida. And there's only one of its kind, and he's flying places to do what we would like to do here. So that was like, to me and to Andy, this was like, wow, how do we, our beacon of whether or not this idea, this project could work is how do we get Hondo to spend his money with Florida companies, with Florida innovators? How do we make it easy for SOCOM and a guy like Hondo Gertz to be able to navigate and put his innovation challenges out to our entrepreneurs? And then we had similar conversations with Jeff Vinnick, who is doing amazing things in Tampa and really throughout the state, but largely in Tampa. And he committed to the same thing, that his organizations would leverage a place, a marketplace where it was easier to engage with Florida companies and Florida innovators. So to that end, this idea called Synapse, to model after those connections that our brain makes, those high value, high speed connections, is a concept that we would build something that made sense of that. This is a first draft, not all-inclusive representation of 9 primary personas that exist in a healthy, vibrant ecosystem. This is some of this was built off of research that Jeff Vinnick shared with us from E&Y that they did on the Cincinnati ecosystem. And they did a pretty in-depth study that was pretty fascinating. And what was wonderful was how important Procter & Gamble and some of the other major players, major companies in that market were to the thriving nature of what early stage companies were doing. And when we looked at this drawing, it was pretty clear that, like, if you don't like bouncing around a lot, it's pretty hard to find what you want. And in some cases, people have talent, corporate innovation challengers. They actually have a pretty narrow thesis of what they might be looking for. You know, if Hondo Gertz decides that he's got a challenge, well, that challenge might be AI, predictive analytics, cybersecurity based on blockchain. Not everybody in cybersecurity and not everybody in AI, not everybody in predictive analytics. And he doesn't have time to run around and meet everybody at the top of the funnel. He needs to meet people at the bottom of the funnel. So the supposition here is that we, a group of caring, committed people who have some time, some passion, some capital, and a willingness to do this for the benefit of our state. This is not a profit-making enterprise. We want to achieve that. We want one day to imagine these journeys where a new Florida resident who came down from somewhere in the Northeast or maybe from Fargo, North Dakota, because they realized it was really cold there. And they arrive in one of our great cities, and they're getting oriented, and they're, maybe they're taking care of their aging parents, maybe they've tired of golf or travel, and they want to get re-engaged. Where do they go? How do they find what they're looking for? They have skills and experiences and desires, and how do they do it without bouncing around too much if they're not inclined to bounce around? And how does someone like Hondo or the Lightning organization with Jeff Vinnick or any other medium, large, mature organization who wants to wake up every day and go, I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 problems that I'm willing to commit to the Florida early stage or innovation economy to solve. Where do they broadcast that? Where do they do that? So what we're here to ask is for your ideas, for your thoughts, for your advice and counsel. If this makes sense, if this is going to work, it's going to work with everybody's support. And it will make each and every one of your organizations and your missions more powerful. It will allow more people to find you. And it will make the journeys for all of these personas just a bit clearer. And that's our hope. That's our ask. We don't have all the answers, but we have spent the last year experiencing enough to know that we get matched up against other ecosystems that are rated much higher than we are in terms of their efficacy, maybe. And to a T, every one of those ecosystems is geographically a fraction of the size of Florida. Arguably, many of them are a fraction of the size of South Florida. And so they're a little easier to navigate, at least metaphorically. And the richness of this state is not the richness of just Orlando or just Tampa or just South Florida or just Gainesville or Tallahassee or any other great place. It's the richness of the entire state. And how do you shrink that so that you can actually find what you're looking for and make these connections not just across town, but across sub-ecosystems and communities and throughout the whole state. So that's our thought, our ask. We don't have the answers. This is a project, this is an initiative, and we hope that those of you who are interested in providing some advice and counsel and guidance to this initiative will join. Thank you very much.